Hi, gang. Here is the Wednesday poll question at Smerconish.com. Your Wednesday poll question at Smerconish.com. It has nothing specifically to do with President Donald Trump. Wow, that's a change. Should charter schools with religious affiliations be eligible to receive public funding? Should charter schools with religious affiliations be eligible to receive public funding? Why are we asking that today? I'll explain in just a moment. Thanks first to my friends at Play Gun Lake Casino and my friends at Parks Casino. Detroit baseball is back, plus Pro Hoops baseball playoffs continue for Detroit tomorrow night, Thursday night. They've got a must-win against New York. You can live bet on games while you watch with completely redesigned, ultra-sleek Play Gun Lake online casino and sportsbook app. Whether Detroit wins or not, there's always another way to win on the Play Gun Lake online sportsbook and casino app. And they've got new hot online slots. They've been adding the Big Easy, Panda Queen, Rake and Bacon Odyssey, Medusa's Golden Gaze, plus Space Invaders Roulette. They are always adding new games, so constantly check out what's going on at Play Gun Lake, the only app that I ever use and recommend to bet on sports and play all my favorite casino games in the palm of my hand from anywhere in the great state of Michigan. That includes you, Mackinac Island, dealers, live dealers, and so much more. Play blackjack, roulette, poker, craps, hot online slots like Cash Eruption, 88 Fortunes. They've got it. Cleopatra online slots. They also have slot games that are based on some of your favorite TV or streaming shows, including Walking Dead and Squid Game. You've got to be 21 and in Michigan for the Play Gun Lake online casino and sportsbook app. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. So welcome to day 101 of Trump 2.0, or said differently, you've survived 100 days of Trump 2.0. On today's radio program, how psyched am I to have the following carpool of individuals? We wanted to wait for 100 days to be in the can and then welcome on the same show Mark Halpern, because Mark Halpern is always my guest on a Wednesday in the second hour of the program. Karl Rove on today's radio program. Doug Sosnick on today's radio program. David Axelrod on today's radio program, all talking about the first 100 days of the second Trump administration. Yesterday's poll result, love the question, find very interesting the outcome. If voters knew what they know 100 days into Trump 2.0, would Trump have defeated Harris? 40,000 plus, 40,772. How did it break? 68.33%. We can call it 70-30. 68.33% said no. No, Trump would not have defeated Harris if we knew all the things that we now know. What's really interesting to me is that I had asked a very similar question in February 10 specifically. If the 2024 election were rerun today, would the result be the same? And then 51.86%, 52% said yes. So in voting that was similar in terms of the number who voted, that was 35,943, if you'd like me to be precise. On February 10, when we were asking if we did it all over again, would he win? 52% said, yeah, Trump would win. And yesterday, when we asked, 70%, rounding upward, said, no, Kamala Harris would have defeated him. I went through all the polling data on yesterday's program, explaining that Donald Trump is the most unpopular president of the last 80 years, at this point of a president's administration. But I also pointed out the data that said that compared to Donald Trump 1.0, he's actually doing better. I mean, he's like settled in at 45% approval rating, and that's pretty much where I suspect he'll remain. The number one story today at Smerconish.com in the newsletter is about President Trump marking his 100th day in office by going to Michigan and doing a rally. Also did another event with Kristi Noem, I thought pardon me, Gretchen Whitmer, how he was able to pull her onto the stage again. Very, very interesting. He also did an interview with Terry Moran from ABC and explained to Terry Moran why he was doing the interview with Terry Moran and what was the explanation. Because I've never heard of you. And on that note, we begin day 101. Okay, today's poll question doesn't have anything specifically to do with President Trump. I hope you find it of interest. I'm telling you this at the outset, I anticipate that there will be a very lopsided result. It doesn't mean the poll question is unworthy. Doesn't mean you shouldn't vote. It just means that, struggle as I might, I couldn't come up with a way to word it that was going to generate an even divide, because I don't see one. I don't see one. Should religious charter schools be permitted to access taxpayer dollars? I went through like 10 incarnations of what to ask. Do we want religious charter schools? That's really the broad question. Should parochial charter schools be provided government funding? Should states allow public charter schools that are religious in nature? Should charter schools be non-sectarian? I almost went with the one I'm about to read to you now, but it just didn't look right. Should a charter school, and then I was going to remind everybody, what is a charter school? Privately operated, but public. Should a charter school, privately operated, but public, that is religious in nature, receive public funds? Michael, my head's about to explode. Tell me how you finally worded it. Okay, how I finally worded it was, should charter schools with religious affiliations be eligible to receive public funding? How about this? Do we want to expand taxpayer-funded religious schools? It's a very big case with a lot of potential ramifications, and it is being argued in the Supreme Court of the United States today. I'm surprised, although maybe I shouldn't be surprised given the composition of the court, but I'm surprised that it made it this far. I would think it a no-brainer. That it would be found unconstitutional, but if they accepted it, maybe they're about to surprise me. And we'll know from the intonation of the voices of the conservative justices, because we know which way the liberals are going to go. And there's a rub here, because it's not 9, it's 8 who will decide this case. I have coverage in the newsletter today from SCOTUS blog. I think Amy Howe is terrific at SCOTUS blog. I also thought the Washington Post coverage on this issue is terrific. Justin Juvenal and Laura Meckler did a great job to get right to the rub of the weeds of it. People on both sides of the case say the key question will be whether charter schools are fundamentally private operators or part of the public school system. If private, religious practice would probably be viewed as constitutional. If public, it would be banned. The state has enlisted private entities to run schools and given public funds to them. And it has said the only kind of pluralism that is off the table is religious pluralism. Opponents will argue the opposite. So it's an Oklahoma case. It's an Oklahoma case. The school at issue is called St. Isidor. The case is being advanced by a religious liberty clinic at Notre Dame. And many of you are thinking, come on, we have, I know how you're thinking it and how you'll say it, and I often say it the same way. We have separation of church and state by virtue of the Constitution, don't we? Well, it's not that straightforward, because what you will find in the First Amendment is not the phrase separation of church and state. That doesn't appear anywhere in the Constitution. What it says is, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. It's known as the Establishment Clause. It's known as the Free Exercise Clause. And the whole business of separation of church and state really comes from, this is quite a tutorial, is it not? Hopefully it's an interesting tutorial. I find it interesting, and I think that stakes are huge, so work with me here. why do we speak of separation of church and state? There was actually a letter from Thomas Jefferson in 1802 to the Danbury Baptist Association where he spoke of the wall of separation between church and state. A wall of separation between church and state is what Jefferson said the First Amendment was building. So I referenced Notre Dame. Notre Dame's fingerprints are on this case going to the Supreme Court of the United States today. A Notre Dame law professor put forth this idea that denying government funding for parochial charter schools would amount to being anti-religious discrimination. And why did she say this? Because she saw something in Chief Justice Roberts' opinions that gave them hope. Garnett is who I'm talking about. Former law clerk to Justice Clarence Thomas, had worked on school choice issues. In a 2020 paper, argues that the Supreme Court has now cracked the door open to the radical remaking of American education by a ruling in a Montana case that states did not exclude religious schools when offering subsidies or funding for private education. And so now Nicole Garnett makes this argument that the court's reasoning there would ultimately allow charter schools that are religious in nature. And the cases that gave rise to the hope of those who would like there to be religious charter schools, a couple of things. One of them you'll remember because we talked about it. 2017, the court found that Missouri could not exclude a religious preschool from a playground resurfacing program. I remember that one. 2020, the Montana case that required states that aid private schools to include some faith-based ones in that funding. 2022, the court required Maine to let parents use vouchers for religious schools. Do you see this whole trend? And then they allowed a high school football coach to pray on the school field. That's the one we talked about. So enter charter schools, which are full-fledged public schools. I'm sure you've got, and will tell me during the course of the program today about your charter school experience. I have a 1 degree of separation from one in particular because it was founded by friends of mine. They're public schools. You know, the same funding, they've got to abide by the same non-discrimination rules, okay, but they're run privately. And charter schools are permitted in 45 states plus the District of Columbia, but they're all required to be non-sectarian, non-religious. The school at issue in this case, I referenced at the outset, is St. Isidor. They seek public funding and to teach religion and to make faith-based hiring and faith-based curriculum decisions, seemingly at odds with the fact that charter schools are supposed to be public schools, but privately operated. So from the Washington Post coverage, which I told you was great today, the Post says each of the recent rulings relies on an expansive view of the First Amendment's free exercise clause, which prohibits the government from interfering with the right of individuals to practice religion. And the critics say the rulings have dangerously diminished the counterpoint, which is the Establishment Clause. Remember what I told you about the wording of the First Amendment? It consists of both the free exercise clause as well as the Establishment Clause. So the counterpoint is that the Establishment Clause prohibits the government from establishing an official religion or favoring certain faiths. If you're going to fund St. Isidor's, are you not establishing, in this case, Catholicism, but I'll come back to that in a moment, as an official religion? And in this entire context, and with an eye toward, this reminds me of the guy who has litigated and brought to the Supreme Court several times the cases against affirmative action. Like, make no mistake, this case today, this was all designed to get to the Supreme Court of the United States, to get to this incarnation of the Supreme Court of the United States. They like their odds because of the composition. I'm asking this question today as to whether we want religious charter schools, even though I don't think there's going to be a public divide on it, but among this incarnation of the Supreme Court, anything is possible. So they create an online charter school called St. Isidor's. The Oklahoma Attorney General, in his last name, his name is John O'Connor. In his last days in office, he backs the idea. And then a new attorney general comes in Oklahoma. Gentner Drummond defeated O'Connor in the GOP primary. Both of them are religious, but the new AG, Drummond, argues that there was an important difference between the government allowing vouchers to fund religious schools and the state creating a religious school. And what he said, and I think this is an important point, is that you're going to open the door here. Be careful what you wish for. In this case, you may like the fact that you may like in Ruby Red, Oklahoma, that it's a conservative charter school associated with the Catholic Church, but you're going to open the door now for other, quote, churches that might run counter to your view, schools run by radical Islamists, or, said the Attorney General, the Church of Satan. And he said he thought that Oklahoma was being used by outside interests to push an agenda that ran counter to state law as well as the state and U.S. Constitution. The Oklahoma Supreme Court sided with Drummond. They sided with the new guy. Okay, the Oklahoma Supreme Court sided with the new guy. They ruled the virtual charter school board must rescind St. Isidor's contract because it violates the First Amendment Establishment Clause. Final thing I'll say about this, and I, again, thank you for allowing me to work through an interesting and complicated case being argued today in the Supreme Court of the United States that is the basis of the poll question at Smerconish.com. Remember this when all is said and done. 7 of the 9 justices were raised Catholic. 6 attended Catholic high schools. The court's ties to Notre Dame and Garnett's Law Clinic, remember I referenced Nicole Garnett, this is her, brainchild, are substantial. In 2021, Notre Dame paid Justice Clarence Thomas almost $20,000 to give a speech. In 2022, an affiliate of the clinic flew Justice Alito to Rome for a 4-day trip to give a speech. In 2022 and 2023, Notre Dame's law school paid Justice Brett Kavanaugh to speak and teach in Rome and London. You're saying, how can they do that? The court's ethics code allows justices to accept these opportunities from universities which are seen as helping spread knowledge about the law. In this case, Amy Coney Barrett, herself a former Notre Dame law professor, friends with Garnett, has recused herself. And Amy Coney Barrett's refusal means only 8 justices, see, doing the weave, and now we're coming home with this. Here we go. Only 8 justices are going to vote on the legality of St. Isidor's. The 3 liberals, we know what they're going to do. They're going to say that use of the school in this fashion is unconstitutional. So there are 3 votes lined up. A 4-4 tie would keep the state Supreme Court ruling in place, which would be a rejection of the idea that charter schools with religious affiliation should be eligible for public funding. What will Chief Justice John Roberts do? In favor of religious charter schools receiving public funds, arguments like educational choice and diversity, meeting community needs, equal opportunity, parental rights. Against this idea, church and state separation, top of the list. The impropriety of the use of taxpayer dollars, the influence on curriculum, the precedent and legal challenges, precedent that seem against this and legal challenges that will be coming in the future. And one last thing. I said I really like the Washington Post coverage of this. When you go to the comments of the Washington Post, you get things like this, quote, looking forward to heads exploding when we get applications for state-funded madrasa schools teaching Sharia law and states can't refuse due to the First Amendment. Or making a non-Catholic pay taxes so that a Catholic school can indoctrinate their students in their religion is not religious freedom, it's a religious tyranny imposed on those who aren't. Or there's no such thing as religious public schools. If a school espouses a religious viewpoint, it is by definition a private school. And on and on and on. All right, you are well armed to go and vote at Smerconish.com on today's poll question. Should charter schools say it one more time and say it clearly, Michael. Okay. Should charter schools with religious affiliations be eligible to receive public funding? Go vote at Smerconish.com. Thank you so much for voting on today's poll question. Like and subscribe, and set yourself up for notifications so that whenever I am bloviating in this fashion, you will be notified and can join me if you choose to do so. Thank you, gang.